My name is John Zachary. I'm a senior facilitator with the Partnership for Public Service. For those of you not familiar with the partnership, we're nonpartisan, nonprofit working to build a better government and stronger democracy. We do that through policy ideas to make government work better, leadership development, workforce programming, and then convening conversations like this one that are designed to help support the federal workforce. We know that many of you continue to be challenged to manage your own emotions through the swift and sometimes many ways unexpected changes that are happening right now. And at the same time, you simultaneously continue your very, very important work for federal agencies, supporting your teams and staff, and navigating through the same environment. We also know that what you do matters, that you care deeply about public service, about the well-being of your colleagues and the critical missions of your agencies. And so we just want to thank you for your service. I'm really happy to be with you all tonight and appreciative of what you're doing. Excuse me. I just want to share a couple quick housekeeping notes, and then we're going to jump into this evening's conversation. So throughout the webinar, we're going to try to kind of get at some of the things that were part of the questions or some of the things you asked while registering. You can also submit a question anonymously through the Q&A function, and we'll try to work to get through some of those as well as we go. We may not be able to get to all of them, but we'll do our best. There will be future civil service support sessions and explainer sessions. So please be on the lookout for additional webinars in the coming weeks. We're going to cover a whole host of topics that hopefully will help you feel supported in this moment. We are also posting all of the videos for both our support and explainer conversations on our resource hub for federal employees. So if you have to miss part of this, or if you want to catch up on other ones, they'll be recorded. And finally, I just want to name that while this discussion is geared towards current federal leaders and supervisors, it is an open forum. So we may have folks joining us that are from outside communities, speak good government groups, media, private sector. Welcome. But we just want to flag that we're really going to be focused on supporting federal leaders tonight. And so we may not touch on things that impact those other communities directly. In terms of what we're actually going to talk about today, we're going to dig into some best practices to help your teams renorm and sort of regain focus, because there's a lot of upheaval right now. We have directives to return to office, there's changes in team structures, there's the loss of team members, and there's a lot of things going on that make it really hard for folks to feel normal and to feel focused and able to just show up and do work right now. And so we want to look at how can we help to manage through that change really well and dig into that. A little bit about me and sort of why I'm here tonight talking about this topic. Prior to my time at the partnership, I worked in change management and doing organizational development in K-12 schools. And in particular, I specialized on building team culture that would kind of help improve teacher retention in some of the most challenged schools in the country. Spend a lot of time trying to do the sorts of things we're going to talk about. And then I am very, very, very delighted to be joined by Tina Sung, who is a strategic advisor of government excellence around COO stuff for the partnership, and is also the board director of the National Academy of Public Administration. And she has just a wealth of experience in building great teams, both in and outside of the government. And I will turn it to Tina to introduce herself and say hello.
Hi. Well, thank you, John. You know, Martin Luther King said, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy." We're in very unusual times, and in the short time we have together tonight, I'll share a few stories about the challenges I've encountered in federal service and my lessons learned, and then we have time to answer your questions. John's designed a wonderful, wonderful session for you, and we want to help all of you continue your commitment to public service. Now, how did I come to public service? I came in as a GS7, and then I got promoted all the way to the SES Corps. And my college's motto was Princeton in the nation's service. And I had the choice to join HHS, Health and Human Services, or the CIA. And at that time, I chose the People's Department. And I thought, well, I'll come for 3 years. But I stayed for 25 years because of the belief in the mission and the ability to supervise early in my career, leadership development opportunities, and my ability to move across agencies. I worked at a HHS, SSA, OMB, and Treasury. And then I got recruited away out of federal service to be CEO of a global nonprofit. I've started 2 businesses, and I was at the partnership for more than 15 years, so I know many of you. I'm still in service. I left last year, but I'm still in service and support the partnership through the SAGE program and on board. So I'm delighted to be with you today. And if you need to reach me afterwards, you can always reach me on LinkedIn. So back to you, John.
Thanks, Tina. And yes, we were very fortunate with the partnership to have Tina as part of our team for quite some time. So I will just name personally that when we talk about norming team culture and like who's really good at it, part of why we wanted to have Tina today is because we have been the very fortunate beneficiaries of her excellence in this area. One other housekeeping note, our colleague Haley Foster may pop up on screen from time to time. She's going to be helping us monitor Q&A, and I will raise questions for us so that if we need them, if they're out there, she'll get them to us. So just if suddenly she appears, that's who she is and what she's doing here. So with that, I'm gonna start us just have some very brief slides today, and we'll kind of go through them and I want to start with William Bridges' transition model. And the reason I want to start here is because we are in this moment experiencing a very large amounts of change really suddenly. And William Bridges' transition model is a really helpful way to sort of visualize what's going on for people in this. One thing I want to say to start about this is that his model really talks about the idea that change is not the same as transition. So change is something that happens external to us. It could be, a new site, a new structure, a new team, a new role. It's something that's happening to us. And a transition is the internal psychological process that we engage in. And so this is really thinking about how do people move through change and actually work through it themselves. And one thing to note about this is that as we move through change, there's sort of predictable stages that people go through. They actually pretty similarly mirror the stages of grief, if you're familiar with those, so that you'll notice some familiarity in them. And change brings up a whole set of emotions for people. It's very normal for folks to feel all sorts of things. So if we start in this ending phase where a change has happened and whatever was before has now ended, and that's going to cause those things of denial and anxiety and shock and confusion and sadness. And it's really normal for folks to feel that. Then as you move sort of through those sorts of emotions, you move into what Bridges talks about as the neutral zone. And so in the neutral zone, there are two sorts of things that can be swimming around sort of simultaneously. And so one of them is going to be this frustration, the anger, this fear. I don't know what is coming. This is really scary that will happen for folks. And then on the other side of that, you have some hope, maybe, or some acceptance of like, okay, this is going on. You might get impatience. I just want this to be over with. Let's get to the next thing. And a little bit of creativity, some sense of, okay, maybe there's opportunity here to try something new and different, and I can think about that differently. And then as you exit the neutral zone, you get into this space of new beginning where there's enthusiasm and trust and excitement and relief because you're, into something that feels more normal. You've accepted it. You're ready to go. a couple things to name about this that are really, particularly important. The first is I always like to orient folks to this little dashed line across the middle of normal productivity. When a big change happens to us, when we're leading a team and something occurs, as we move into that neutral zone, all of those emotions are going to make it really difficult for our teams, for ourselves, to produce work at a normal level. We just can't be quite as productive because we're distracted by all this other stuff going on. We don't know what's happening. We're not used to this. We have to take on this heavier cognitive load of what's going on. And so, as leaders, anything that we can do to be mindful of that, to kind of assess how we might say, let's take something off people's plate or change the expectations right now so that people don't feel this, there's so much they have to do, or we're acknowledging the difficulty of this moment. But then also that creates some urgency. The longer we live in that neutral zone, the longer we are unable to deliver on the critical work that we're trying to accomplish. And so, as leaders, it's so important to think about how we can shepherd folks through this in as thoughtful and humane and empathetic a manner as possible, but also one in which we are really able to move and get as many people as possible to this space of new beginning, let's move forward. Which does sometimes mean you have to do things. There's a John Wooden quote, to go slow, to go fast, that you need to take some time to kind of slow down, assess what's happening, meet people where they are, and then help them move forward. One more sort of look at this, and then I do want to pass to Tina, who has a very good uh, practical sort of here's how this plays out in real life story to tell, which is another way of looking at this is a sort of what happens over time. So in this one, you'll see sort of where are people at any given point in time, and what is their focus. And I like this because a couple things are true. The first is things are happening simultaneously for people. Not everyone is going to move through this at the same pace, nor are they going to move through it linearly necessarily. They might go to one sort of space and then jump back and kind of move around. So what we need to do is kind of create space as we go through for all the different places where people might be. The other thing to name that I think is really important here is that when a big change occurs, there are going to be some folks who are just already ready to go with, all right, let's go. I'm ready to move on. I don't feel that denial and shock. I skip the neutral zone altogether, ready to move on. And you are going to have some folks on the flip side of that that never really leave the ending and losing and letting go space. And so your role as a leader is to try to move people as thoughtfully as possible and get as many folks as possible to that new beginning. So to get this into a less abstract place, I want to pass to Tina to talk about some of her experience sort of going through a major transition like this while she was in government.
Okay. So I'm going to tell you about a story where I was part of an agency that was abolished with the stroke of a pen. We were a team of high performers, and my job was to get them to the other side. So let me share a little bit of the backstory. I was at the Social Security Administration, and I was directed by my commissioner to go to OMB to start the Federal Quality Institute with four other SESers. And I told my commissioner, like, I know nothing about quality. And she said to me, you're smart, you'll learn, go. And the insight for all of you on this call, you are all smart, you're able to learn, and you will adapt. So, our mission at the FQI was to bring quality management systems and practices to leaders of government. Citizens at that time were angry, were not happy with the services we were providing, and we had the charge to be more efficient and effective. And so we did this by speaking to dozens of SES every week We created the President's Award for Quality. We opened the door to private sector to come in and share best practices. And many of the principles that you see in well managed organizations today are the same. Focus on the customer, improve your processes, measure results with data, empower your people. And the executive director position was a very sexy job. It was filled by a presidential appointee, and our director, and I reported to her, came from the renowned Herman Miller Company, where the legendary Max Dupree was her mentor. And Dupree is author of a great book, if you can get your hands on it, is called Leadership is an Art. Now, what happens often with programs that launch in OMB, we were moved to different agencies, USDA and then OPM, and that's okay. Our work stayed the same. We were very successful, we had high impact, and we had revenue. So one day, I come back to the office and I'm told we were abolished by the stroke of a pen. I go, why? What happened? The first was money. OPM needed the revenue, our net profit, that we were bringing in to meet a deficit in their revolving fund. The second is relationship. Our executive director did not get along with the director of OPM. She was an at will appointee, and he fired her. And the third was we had no statutory protection. We were not established with any statute and did not have a line item appropriation. And there's a lot of parallels to what Doge is doing today. So we're in shock, we're in denial, we're angry. We say, well, how could he do this? But he did. So, what did we who were left behind, and many of you are those still in service, what did we, the career team, do? Well, we went through the stages of grief on John's chart. We were angry, we were in denial, and then we started to bargain and explore. We said to ourselves, well, we do important work, the customers like what we do. How can we survive? So that's important, survival of the mission and the work. We brainstorm options. Should we go to Congress? Can we ask for an appropriation? Can another agency take us? Can we appeal to the vice president? Can we go to the private sector and become our own business? We really didn't know, so we had to explore. Now, I was one of the peer SESers, but I was elected the leader. And followership is trust. I kind of had the vision and I had the courage and I had the relationships. So I tried to explore all our options and keep my team informed. But one of my lessons learned during that period was that your network matters. I would go to all our former customers and ask for their advice and ask, would you continue to work with us and pay us? And the answer was yes. We didn't have facilities, we didn't have phones, and my network and a high level of trust came through. And an executive at one of the financial agencies said, all right, I'll let you have some of my empty space and phones until you get back on your feet. So, my advice, my lesson learned is to keep your network alive and dig your well before you need it. We were lucky in that Vice President Gore had established franchise funds at that time. That's where you earn your keep, including your overhead, and you have to be self sufficient. So I went around and I asked Treasury if they were willing to bet on us. And luckily for me, Nancy Killifer, who was the assistant secretary and CFO at the time, said, I'll give you a chance. And we became part of the Treasury Franchise Fund. So, this is a huge change management challenge. You're leading people from one side of that chart to the other side. And one of the things that I did once we knew we had a new beginning was I hosted a rest in peace party. All of us who were part of the team gathered in a conference room. Everybody got a piece of flip chart paper, and everybody was to write the headstone of the FQY. What did it mean to you? What was your eulogy to that institution that you had stood up and nurtured and grown? And our job was to let go of what was. I have the saying, you can go to Pity City, but you can't live there. I had to let people grieve, but my job was to focus them on the mission and the work. And the next day, we opened for business as the Federal Consulting Group in the Treasury Department. We survived and we thrived and we grew. And what I learned from this is two things, that leadership is about influencing people. I had no positional power. I was elected. But we had a purpose and we were motivated to do the mission work. That's what drew everybody to us. And the other lesson I learned was that rituals are important. When someone new arrives, welcome them with some kind of ceremony. When they leave, honor their service. I think the military does this beautifully with the passing of the baton to the incoming commander. And I was so happy that we were able to survive and grow. And we were successful. And the good news is, I was recruited out of that job, out of public service, to be CEO of a global nonprofit. So I'll turn it back to John for the next phase of our learning.
Thank you, Tina, and thank you for sharing that. I in particular just and the one thing I want to pull out of that is how thoughtful you were about meeting people where they were and not invalidating the feelings that were coming up for people, because I think that's something that can be really hard in this moment is to your point, you have to let people go to where they are. You just have to make sure they don't stay there.
Mhm.
So one of the the session is about renorming teams, and so want to dig into the teams part of this in particular. And I think no better place to start than the team life cycle, which is from Tuckman's first name is escaping me. That it is great research that sort of looks at how teams exist over time and how to move through team life cycles. And so in these, you start with a place of, okay, we are forming a team. We're looking for direction and guidance. Uh, the team is storming, which means, we're starting to work together, but we're starting to have those moments of conflict. How do we actually work together? How do we fit in? We're not used to working together on things. We have different styles. We have different needs. How do we balance those sorts of things? Um, when you get to that norming space where you've kind of figured out what everybody's needs are, you're sharing leadership, you're trusting one another, and you can actually start to get to the place of performing, where you're really highly productive and you're adaptable and you're doing great work together. One of the things that can happen for teams over time is you go to the stagnating phase, which disappointingly does not have an orming thing. So sorry. Where folks can kind of get into autopilot. You're used to working really well together, and this can lead to sort of groupthink where, well, we've just always done it this way and it works, and you stop trying to iterate and improve. And then over time, you have transformation of a team. Something changes, there's a transition, and your team goes back to the forming stage. I wanted to start here because one of the things that is particularly important to name in this moment is that many of the changes that have happened around you mean that whether you wanted to be or not, whether your team was working well together or not, you have been reset to the forming stage right now for many of you probably. Where whether you wanted to be or not, you have to kind of go, okay, we have to reset here. What does this mean for us right now? Where are we going? And so when you're in that forming stage, being in the space of being really intentional about, let's talk about what we're trying to accomplish. Let's talk about how we want to work together. Let's be in dialogue about this. And again, to this idea of slowing down so that you can go fast later on and can go far together is a really important thing to do in this space. The other thing I will pull out of here that I think is worth naming is people love to try to skip the storming phase. It feels bad. Storming is not always fun to go through, where you maybe butt heads a little bit. But that storming phase is so, so, so crucial and important and necessary to go through because you have to create space for folks to share what their needs are and actually like know what everyone on your team is going through, really listen and try to build something together. It doesn't have to feel bad. You can do so in ways that are structured and thoughtful and create space for that. But it is both normal and necessary to have some of that storming occur. And so, Tina, I am curious in the example you just shared, sort of you're going through this big transition and your team did have to then reform. What was this sort of process like for y'all? And maybe what were there some stormy moments along the way?
Oh, for sure. There's lots of storming, especially when there's fear and uncertainty and doubt. And as you navigate, all of you navigating this neutral zone, be mindful of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. People go back to the lower level safety, security, and then they need to feel they're belonging of part of a team. Like, do I stay with this FQI group who doesn't have a future, or I don't know if they have a future? And people want to belong to something important, and they need encouragement and self-esteem. So it's important to listen to what's underneath the concern. And I want to share a story that my dad told me when I was much younger, and it stayed with me a very long time. It's part of who I am. My dad was a scholar of Chinese literature. And so he told me this story. In the third century AD, there was a great king, and he sent his son to the temple to study with a great master because the prince was going to succeed his father as the king. And the master was to teach the boy the basics of being a good ruler. So when the prince arrived at the temple, the master sent him to the Mingli forest and said after 1 year he was to return to the temple and describe the sound of the forest. So 1 year later, the prince returns and the master asks, "What did you hear?" And the prince said, "I could hear the cuckoo sing, and the leaves rustle, and the hummingbirds hum, the grass blow, and the bees buzz, and the winds whisper and holler." So when the boy finished, the master said, "I want you to return to the forest to listen to what more he could hear." Now the boy was very puzzled. Hadn't he discerned every sound already? But he returns to the forest, and for days and nights he was alone in the forest listening. Then one morning, as he sat silently, he could discern these faint sounds, unlike any he had heard before. The more acutely he listened, the clearer the sounds became. Aha, these must be the sounds that the master wished me to discern. So he returns to the temple, and the master asks, "What more did you hear?" And the prince said, "When I listened more closely, I could hear the unheard. I could hear the unheard. The sound of flowers opening, the sound of the sun warming the earth, the sound of grass drinking the morning dew." And the master nodded approvingly. He said to the prince, "To hear the unheard is the necessary discipline to be a good ruler, to listen to their hearts, to their feelings uncommunicated, to the pain unexpressed. The demise of states comes when leaders listen only to the superficial and do not penetrate deeply into the souls of the people to hear their true feelings." So, what I took away from that, and it's part of who I am as a leader, is take the time to listen with compassion. I had to relate to my team and understand what fears and doubts they had regarding the changes. And sometimes all they wanted was to be heard. You're just there listening and going, I hear you. Very interesting. And that's why I think it's so important to be looking at someone when they're speaking to you, because you pick up all the unseen or unheard signals that they're trying to communicate. And what I found when I've done this, because I love to do stakeholder management, is I always get a nugget of insight, either personally or that will help the business. So, outstanding leaders go out of their way to boost the self confidence of their people. Because if your people believe in themselves, it's amazing what they can do. So, that was our storming. We stormed a lot. I did a lot of listening. But at the end of the day, as the leader, I had to make some of the hard choices, and I did. So, back to you, John.
All right. Uh, it's a beautiful story, Tina. Goosebumps. Thank you for sharing that. Um, so as we know that this is happening and we kind of are like, okay, we're at this forming stage, we need to figure out how to go forward. One of the places to start is to kind of look at like more tactically, what are the things that make an effective team? What should we be paying attention to? Because there's a whole set of things out there that we might need to or want to, focus in on. And so narrowing down a little to what are the sorts of things. And so they're bucketed into four parts here. And the first is this bucket around psychological safety. Do your folks on a team feel that there's trust? Do they feel that they can show up and have some freedom to speak and to move and act in ways that are not going to cause problems for them and speak their mind and be honest? To Tina's point around listening, are you creating space for them to feel heard? Um, there's peace around mission. Do folks' individual goals align with the mission? Do they have pride in it? Can you really create some space to attend to that? There's much more technically the roles and responsibilities. How are you creating accountability to one another? How are you delegating to one another? And importantly, how are you creating opportunities for learning and development so that folks feel like they can grow on the team? Tina, I heard you earlier when you were talking about staying at HHS and like talked about like early career opportunity to supervise, like those sorts of things that allow people to say like, I will stay here. This is a team I want to be on because I'm getting to stretch my muscles and do some things. And then finally, communication. How are you going to work together? What kind of collaboration styles do you have? How do you approach conflict? How do people want to be recognized and receive feedback? What works well for them? And creating space to talk about these sorts of things. Um, Tina, you are masterful at I think all of these. I can say from experience. Um, I one thing I would love to hear you talk a little bit about is Tina's tidbits. If you wouldn't mind digging into that a little bit and sort of how that came to be.
Okay, I'd be happy to. You know, a manager deals with complexity and leader is dealing with uncertainty. And I remember March 13th, 2020, when the entire nation said, we're shutting down our offices. You are all to go home. We have this COVID pandemic sweeping the nation, and we didn't know what was going to happen. We thought, oh, we're going home for 2 weeks. Okay. But one never knows. And I was thinking to myself, I was a vice president and I had a group of people reporting to me formally and informally. And we had a really good dynamic. And I said to myself, what does my team need from me today? How can I create relational energy that keeps people connected and gives them a sense of belonging. So, what I decided to do is I started a simple little email called Tina Tidbits. So, what's a tidbit? A tidbit is a choice or pleasing bit of information. And every day for 2 years, I didn't know I'd have to do it that long. I would just send out 5 bullets in an email to my team of quotes that inspired me, pictures of my rose garden, news, pictures of my family, the day that the Chinese sweep their graves to honor their relatives, whatever. And I invited my team to join because I didn't want to clog up their inboxes. So it was all opt in. And then one of the criteria I set was I was really going to run out of information soon is that everybody who is a Tidbit member had to contribute something every week. And so that got everybody engaged in sharing about their personal life. We did not talk about work because there was plenty of emails and Zooms dealing with work. And gradually, to my surprise, almost half the partnership staff were on Tidbits. No VPs, only staff. And what was so heartwarming was that people who left the partnership to get who got promoted, they wanted to stay part of the Tidbits family. So what I was doing was I was creating in that red box that psychological safety, that feeling of trust. So you're building this emotional bank account with the people you work with, and you're investing in trust. We gave kudos, we're investing in appreciation, and we're investing in connection. And I learned this from my mentor, Frances Hesselbein, who's a legendary executive. She said, we manage in the world that is round. It is fluid and flexible. So there was no hierarchy in this. I generated this, but we were all equal. And so what I learned and what people have told me so much is that real leaders touch people in their hearts. And in these times of trauma, I would say, you are role modeling compassion. Now, going to some of the other boxes, it's important that you have a clear mission, that you stay calm, and you do the work. Um, and trust is the bedrock. And once you have that, you can then do some of the other things. But I love the learning and development box because that's essentially part of my persona. At the FQI, after we got started, I set up a learning day once a month. And every day, all the consultants would come in from their different clients all around the country, and we gather for a full day. And we just share what customers were telling us, what we were seeing. And they each took turns teaching each other about a new approach, a new technique, a new process, a new book that they read. And what I've learned in supervising hundreds and hundreds of people, everyone is eager to learn and grow. So if you're part of helping them learn and grow, they give back to you so much more. The other thing I learned through tidbits and just my style is to exercise lavish communication. Expand your volume and frequency. Talk about the mission. Talk about the financials. Talk about productivity measures. Talk about the status of new initiatives underway. Have a refresher on your vision, mission, and values, but keep the communication pipeline wide open because that's what people are hungry for in times of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and lack of clarity. The also other thing that I think is very important, especially with how Doge is approaching everything, think through your metrics. Be able to measure your value add and your contribution to the mission. And that's a team sport. All of you need to get together and think through how you might do that. So let me stop there. I think I've covered most of the things on this chart. Oh, yes,
I
just say
think
thank you all the time.
you have, although I will dig a little slightly. I'll share. So like I shared before my background. I worked in really challenged schools, and so in spaces where it's really stressful to work. And one of the things that I will name particularly around that sort of last column around communication
Mhm.
um, is that piece around like when folks are in that state of fear or frustration or whatever, they don't always show up as the best version of themselves.
Mhm.
I know I don't when I'm in that and I have to pause and slow down. And so when we take some time to really proactively have the conversation about how do we want to work together, what helps me feel feedback and hear it better and do those sorts of things, it can really help de-escalate some of those moments and allow people to get to a space of sort of settledness where they can respond best to one another. I'm a fond like a thing that I say frequently is that unsettled folks unsettle others and settled people settle others. So when you are settled, when you are able to enter into a space of calm, it makes it easier to do this. And having some of those proactive conversations will help with that. But the second piece that will help with that, and is where we kind of want to end today, with the very almost tired cliche of the like secure your mask before helping others, is that a core piece of this is self-care. Um, if we go back to where we started on the transition model, you are being asked to shepherd your team through that, and you yourself also have to go through that too. And so finding those ways to take care of yourself are so critical right now, not simply because it's good for us to do, right? Like we should always try to engage in self-care because we are human beings and should be able to take care of ourselves. But also, if we don't take that time to help ourselves get settled right now, it is so hard to then help other folks be settled. It is hard to move folks through those sorts of challenges if we ourselves are in turmoil and struggling and not feeling those senses of support. Um, what does self-care look like for you is going to vary for every single person on this call. Um, I I'll share for me personally, I'm like an avid golfer. And when I get really stressed out, my wife will sometimes be like, "Hey, I'm gonna get a babysitter this weekend so you can go golf," which is one, a testament to how much I just love my wife and how well she knows me, but also is really helpful for me because I'll name like I go spend a few hours on a golf course and I come back and I am not the same person I was when I left. I'm calmer, I'm better able to understand what's happening, I can think more clearly. So whatever that is for you, and hopefully you have a hobby that doesn't take as long as mine does. Finding those spaces for self-care are particularly important. Um,
Mhm.
Tina, anything to add on that?
Well, there's a book out right now, The Body Keeps Score.
Love,
You
love,
know,
yes, yes.
in terms of self-care, your body is speaking to you, and you do know. Don't suppress it, honestly. Listen to it, because you can't care for others if you haven't taken care of yourself. So, the I've been just all the things on the news are so smart. Just get enough sleep, eat well, take breaks. We're so lucky it's spring. I put my cherry blossoms up because we can now leave the house and walk and get some sunlight. And you have to sustain your energy so you can energize others. That's what a leader does, is you're energizing others. And if you don't have that energy to do so, there's no way you can energize then. So remember the space between no longer on the left side of John's picture to we're not there yet. We're going to be in this neutral zone for a long time, couple of years. So pace yourself. And this is a time for you to learn what kind of leader, what kind of person you are. And then I'll just share one of my favorite sayings came from Marjorie Blanchard. She's the wife of Ken Blanchard, the renowned author of The 1 Minute Manager. And their house had burned down. And afterwards, she told a group of women, She said the most important thing is to keep your I love yous up to date. Your house can burn down, but it's your relationship, your family, the things that you care about and love. So I'm very lucky. I have a wonderful husband, and I tell him I love him every day because you never know. So, as John says, put your oxygen mask on first so you can take care of others. And Haley's here with questions from the
So,
audience.
exactly.
Yes. So something that having experienced working under you that I think would particularly be helpful for folks who are listening today. Tina, having talked about the importance of self-care and how you do that yourself as a leader, I think you were really good at building in a structure that allowed the people under you to care for themselves. How did you implement elements of the team to kind of make that happen? I know that might be a tough one, but I think you have a
Well,
lot of
you experienced it, so you tell them.
Tina, I think something that I would share on your behalf, I guess in this instance, is that you were really good at protecting our bandwidth and being mindful of all the things on our plate and being able to help us prioritize what is a nice to have, what is a must have, and what is something that we can kind of ease into the sunset. So I think that's the first one that comes to mind. And I guess if I could turn it back to you to kind of expand on how you were able to manage all that while also taking care of yourself, I think that would be helpful for folks.
Well, I, the leader, am above the fray and I can see what's going on. It's like a big chess game when you're in the executive team of a business. So that is my responsibility to get the best discretionary effort out of you. And it comes back to that listening. I'm listening to your needs. I'm looking at you and I can see you're stressed beyond belief. I better take something off your plate. And then what was so nice about our team, though, that I loved, was other people would step in and say, "Oh, let me help you, Haley. I can do that." So it isn't I, Tina, having to do your work. But if I had to, I would, because it's the customer that matters. But the team dynamic is so strong that I would see others just say, let me help you, or let's simplify it. Or, and I could say, we just won't do that anymore. And that's another thing a leader has to do to say, no, that's not important. And for you who are feds right now, with your budgets being cut and fewer staff, you will have to decide what you do and don't do. And, that's a judgment call, and that's why you're in the roles you are. So that's one, but also that gets back to the relational energy amongst the group. You know what's going on in their whole life. You're managing a whole person, not just an automaton who does tasks. And a leader's role is to appreciate the whole person and bring out their best, because then there would be times when you would step up and help me, like when my mom was dying and all of you stepped up to help me.
Thanks, Tina, for that. And kind of sharing a question from the Q&A. Someone had a question about how every day, arguably every hour, there's something new ending, and how can folks kind of navigate this process of going through a transition when it feels like there's a new one that starts frequently, one after the other? What would be your advice there?
John.
I was like, I actually may jump in here because like, I have lived in that environment before. And so I think there's two things that I would say in response to that. The first is I would reiterate the self-care piece that you're going to have a hard time responding to all that change if you're unsettled. Much more tactically, uh, what I've seen work really well, particularly for schools that I work with who dealt with this, and like I worked, for example, with a school that was in like a heavily trauma impacted community where you were having like very serious incidents happening in and around the school very frequently, is they built systems to help them respond with thoughtfulness to this. So like you cannot predict what might come, you can't do those things, but you can build a system that says like when we get an input as a team and there's a big change, here are the things that we will commit to do in order to figure out how we're going to respond to that. So like one of the schools I worked with was like, great, we'll convene this set of folks and we'll talk about like what happened, what do we think the impact will be on kids, what do we think the impact will be on staff, and then like what do we need to do? And then like when something would happen, this group of people that included some of the support staff and the principal would quickly convene, sit down, take 20 minutes to say like what's going on, what do we think we need to do, let's formulate a plan. And so I think when you are dealing with that sort of sustained sort of thing, there is no, like every single one of those instances will require possibly something different, but having a clear structure that says when the thing happens, we meet together and we spend time that we need to talk about it and we address it together can be a really, really helpful to allow you to feel like you have some sense of control over what is in your locus of control, what's in your ability to hold, and that you're going to be able to respond together and in a unified way. So I would recommend any ability you have to kind of build something like that, even if it's a quick check-in or whatever, so that when a change occurs, you are responding in a consistent way to the change, not necessarily to the actual like things that need help, but how you process it.
I would totally second that, having a process, having an escalation process if it's more serious. But underpinning that, I think, John, is the values of the group. I can hear, knowing you, the values of caring for the student, protecting their safety and their life. And another value that's important in these times of change is, again, communicating with the people who need to know. So that's why I was talking about lavish communication, and it should come from one or two of you, not everyone. So, in fast growth businesses, I work a lot with entrepreneurial businesses that are growing rapidly. We have something called the daily huddle, and we talk every day. What's going on? What's new? Where might we have to change? But the bedrock is the vision of what you're trying to accomplish. All of you have very clear missions. Mine was get the check out in the right amount on the right day to the right person when they're supposed to get it. That was very clear. So we're anchored in our bedrock mission, vision, and values, and then communicating well, and then pivoting. But if you come from the perspective, and John is one of these, that you have an A team, then the A team responds well as long as they know there's a process and that they're living according to their values and what's important to them.
+1, Tina. Yes, I agree. We have one more question that we'll get to in a moment, but before sort of our last question, I want to recognize that we're almost at time and we do want to get your input for sessions going forward. We have received lots of great ideas about future sessions, but we want to take the time to kind of get more. So we're going to ask for your answer to 3 quick poll questions. First is about how effective you feel this has been. The second, how much you agree that this information you'll be able to take and apply it moving forward. And then the third is if you have any ideas for future webinar topics. My colleague Haley is going to initiate the poll shortly. Your responses are anonymous, but we do really, really appreciate them, and they're very helpful for us as a way to design these moving forward. Give you just a few moments to do that. As we do, there was one last question around sort of this idea that like this is not a normal time and anything else we can do to support leaders in it. And one thing I will name, having spent a lot of time working with principals and superintendents who are often lonely because they are there's nobody else around them that's with them. Finding networks of other folks who are going through what you're going through and connecting with them can be really, really helpful. Yeah, maybe you'll get some good tactical ideas and sorts of things like that, but also just to be able to be in shared community with somebody who understands exactly what you're going through can be a really helpful thing. So that would be a my additional piece of recommendation on that. I don't know if I have anything else to know on that.
No, I think that's the number one. That everything where I go, I feel the hunger for human connection. So please, please stay in touch with the partnership. They are your hub for connecting you to resources that you need. They can be a sounding board. They're absorbing a lot, but they're there for you. And I'm part of the partnership, so I'm here for you also.
Will also say, Tina, we did have somebody asking if you have a podcast or if you want to join as a guest of one because of how calm and soothing you are and how good your advice is. So I will second that question. If you want to start a podcast, I would gladly listen to it. As we wrap up, a couple things to share. Please visit our Supporting Federal Employees site for more resources and for all of the prior iterations of these that we've done. Again, an extremely heartfelt thank you for all of you for what you're doing every day and for joining us tonight. Please keep questions and topics coming. We will try to address them in upcoming discussions in our Supporting Federal Civil Servants series. Our next civil service support session is going to be on April 9th. My colleague, Yenny Simone, is going to be talking about mission match and sort of how to reconnect to mission for federal leaders in this time. There are also a couple upcoming explainer series topics that are coming that you can see on the website. And don't forget to visit our resource hub on our website, ourpublicservice.org. We've got lots of stuff for you there. Tina, any other final words to share as well?
I would only share the serenity prayer because I saw in one of the comments, this is like such unusual times. So all of you know what it is please grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So stay close to your network, to your advisors, your friends. And I think together, we who are public servants and care about our democracy will get through this.
Tina, thank you very much. Have a great evening, and please be in touch. The partnership's here to help. Thanks for the work you continue to do for our country.